All right, welcome to Module 2. All right, so this is Mastering the Moment, Module 2, Mindfulness. So the first video is the problem with being in your mind, right? So what is the problem with actually being stuck up here, and why are we trying to break free from that and actually get into the present moment, get into reality, right? So the first thing is the mental chatter. So we all know, especially those who are aware, self-aware, right? We all know that the mind loves to talk, right? The mind is always talking, talking, talking. Some of it can be good, some of it can be bad, some of it can be relevant, some of it can be irrelevant, right? It's always talking. There's constant chatter going on, right? And what happens is a lot of times this mental chatter keeps conflicting, right? It's conflicting with itself. It's conflicting with more thoughts, right? Or it's conflicting with us and what we're trying to do here in reality, right? It doesn't want to do the work that you're trying to focus on. It doesn't want to not do a certain thing, right? It doesn't want to break this addiction. It doesn't want to change. It doesn't want to overcome itself, right? It doesn't want to have to break down and kill off old patterns and create new ones, because it takes work, it takes effort. And so the mind is constantly trying to talk at you in order to distract you, in order to pull you away from this process, right? This process of actually going through with the work and actually creating change for yourself. So what does it do? It continues to talk and talk and talk. And what happens over time is, as it's talking, it's actually trapping your consciousness within it, right? So more and more consciousness gets trapped within the thoughts as we get wrapped up in it, right? As we ourselves get wrapped up in the mind and its thoughts, we actually start to lose consciousness to it. It starts to take on more of that consciousness. So a quick lesson before I get into the next point is just that consciousness itself actually becomes trapped within thoughts. So these thought loops that we have are actually trapped consciousness moving in the same direction, in the same flow. And funny enough, this is what we do when we're talking about someone who's just cuckoo bananas, doesn't know what they're on. But that's literally what it is. Someone who's actually losing it mentally, it's because their consciousness is literally going in this circular motion, in this loop, right? And it's trapped in this loop. And so what this does is it creates these mental structures, these mind structures, right? And these mind structures are the continual patterns that we follow, right? The day-to-day patterns that we constantly go about, right? The day-to-day thoughts we constantly have about ourselves and others, right? So these mind structures that are created by our trapped consciousness going in a loop, they they basically take that consciousness, it loops, but what happens is the more we pay attention to it, the more consciousness it pulls into the loop. Think of like a vortex. Think of like a hurricane. When it's the eye of the hurricane, it's pulling all of the wind, all of the elements into this one area, this one point, but that point itself is also still moving, right? So there's no real end point, but it's fixating consciousness onto a singular point, right? And then that singular point keeps fluctuating, and that creates confusion, and that creates a lot of chaos within the mind. And so what happens as this continues for a long period of time, right? When this continues for, let's say, a couple weeks, or let's say a couple of years, right? When this continues for a long time and it becomes a habitual pattern, eventually we begin to identify with it. We begin to assume this is just how I am. This is just who I am. This is just the way I am. Then what happens is an ego is created around it. What is an ego? Ego is just a solidified mental structure. It's a mental framework that consciousness has a very hard time moving outside of, right? And so that becomes our identity, that becomes our personality, that becomes who we are. And we have to actively break down these mental structures in order to free up our consciousness again. And so one of the main purposes of this entire course is to teach you how to break down those mind structures and actually break free from them in order to pull your consciousness back, right? You need to pull your consciousness back out of the mind, because as powerful of a tool as the mind is, it's not great to have all of your consciousness up here, right? Your consciousness, your awareness, your you could say your soul energy, your solar energy, right? Your essence, right? That's what consciousness is your essence, is your awareness. Basically, we need to pull it out of the mind, and I'll teach you later on in the course, but the end goal is to actually ground it into the body instead. So I will just quickly walk you through the easiest way to pull consciousness from your mind, the quickest way and the most effective way, which is just to observe these mind structures as is, right? So not trying to change them actively, but just observing them with full attentiveness, full attention, and making sure you don't get pulled back into them. And as you do this, they will break down themselves, right? Consciousness is all you need to dissolve all of these internal structures, all of these traumas, everything, right? All you need is enough consciousness, enough awareness, enough observation of the thing, which in this case is thoughts and these mind structures, right? Observation of the thing is all you actually need. So by observing the mind structures very attentively, very intently, with the intention of breaking them down, they will eventually start to dissolve and break down. And what you can do is you can actively think of like magnetizing it, or maybe think about like pushing against the mental structure with more consciousness. As you push against, consciousness will return back, and anything that is not consciousness will continue to be pressed until there's nothing left, basically, because these mind structures feed off our consciousness. They live off our consciousness. Their essence dissolves without our consciousness, without our power, right? And so once we pull our consciousness away from them, then they break down, then they dissolve. And then what happens is we have the opportunity to create a new one in its place. And that new one is typically going to be more reflective of our actual true being. And then eventually we'll have to break down this new one and create a new one that's even closer, right? So it's a constant process of breaking them down and rebuilding them as needed, right? So that's the end of this first video. I will see you guys in the next one. Peace. All right, here's video 2 of module 2. So observation. So I ended off the last video talking about the importance of observing, right? Using observation as essentially a tool to break down these mental structures, these mind structures, these egos, and to recreate them, right? To make them more reflective of our true being. So now I'm going to get into observation and the importance of observation, and then a lot of what I'm talking about here is basically just how to observe yourself in a way that can be transformative. So the first thing is observing the mind. We basically will have to start here. We will have to start with the mind, right? Because the mind is where we're currently trapped, right? The mind is where we're currently stuck. The mind is what has trapped our consciousness. The mind is what has created these egos that we identify with so deeply that we can't actually move forward, that we can't actually make change in our lives, right? Because these egos hold us to where we are. So all of it is the mind. All of it is within the mind. And so the first step is actually breaking free from the mind itself. And so observing the mind, observation of the mind, observation of what is going on within your mind, that is going to be the first step, right? And so you can see the last video in the end, I explain how to basically break down mental structures with observation. But in general, whether we are dissolving or we are just observing, observation itself is the key, right? So observation of the mind itself is key. So when we are not attentive, when we are not aware, when we are asleep, we are unconscious, right? And that unconsciousness leaves room for our mind to develop these egos, develop these mental structures, to basically do what it does on its own. But A, being misled, and B, it's pulling our consciousness into it, right? It's pulling our consciousness into the mind, almost like a vacuum or like a magnet, right? And it's pulling it into the mind in order to utilize it. So what it's doing is it's constantly basically utilizing or burning away at consciousness in order to continue these thoughts, in order to continue these egoic expressions, I guess you could say, right? So it's trapping the consciousness and basically burning it away, using it, think of like a fuel or like an energy, basically. It's using it just as it would energy. But the consciousness is what creates these strong thoughts, these strong egos, these strong identities. And so what we can do is we can pull all of our consciousness back and create a stronger one, right? The strongest identity, by actually pulling all our consciousness together into one identity. But the mind is creating all of these multiple different personalities, all of these multiple different egos, all of these multiple different thought loops and mental structures, right? some of them may seem good, but they actually aren't, right? So, for example, my desire to grind away at business is good at times, but the mind has actually created it in order to cope, because I can avoid certain things by working on the business, right? And so all mental structures, if not consciously created, are going to be flawed in some way, right? So even what seemed like a desire to work on business was actually not a desire to work. It was a desire to procrastinate, masked as a desire for work with business. Does that make sense? So there are multiple different examples I could go through of the mind doing things like this. I just used that one because it was a simple one I just came up with for myself that I could go and work on, right? Because I have spent years, like 1.5, I guess, maybe not like years, but 1.5 to 2 years really focused on just this, really focused on just overcoming the mind, observing the mind, and actually changing the patterns within the mind, right? So I'm going to quickly explain why observation is all that you actually need to do, which I did briefly in the last video, but I'll just go deep into it here. So we as the consciousness, there is really one thing that we can do, right? There's one thing that we can actually actively do, which is observe. The body, the mind, and the spirit are what's responsible for the actions that we take within the reality, right? But we as the soul are not these things. We are embodying, or we are utilizing these things, right? One term I always use is the human vessel, because it is a vessel. It is a vehicle for us to experience reality. So all that we can do, just as we can in a car, right? All that we can do is observe and then press the gas or the brake and utilize the steering wheel to keep us going in the right direction. But the car, the vehicle, is what is doing most of the work. So we need to disidentify with the vehicle. The vehicle is what is resisting the work, not you, not the soul. And second to that, observation itself and awareness and consciousness is what sends the right signals throughout the system, throughout the brain, throughout the nervous system, in order for us to actually actualize on this, right? So you can think of the vehicle as just the vehicle. The car is just the car, but the car doesn't have its own eyes. You are the car's eyes, right? You are what tells the car where to go. If the car was to say, no, I want to go left, when you need to go right, you're going to steer it left. You're going to steer it right. Yeah, that was terrible. But yeah, you're going to steer it right. You're going to take it right. Even if it wanted to go left, that doesn't make sense. You're not going to listen to the car. The car doesn't know where it's going, right? And you got to look at it the same with your body and your mind, right? They're blind. In this reality, you are blind. So your ability to observe, right, your consciousness, that is your key to actually navigating this reality, right? So everything that you want to achieve is about observing yourself on a deep level and seeing everything that needs to be changed, right? Seeing it fully and clearly, and then doing it, right? Guiding and directing the vessel towards that actual achievement. So, as consciousness, as the awareness, as the driver, your job is to basically be attentive at all times. You have to be conscious at all times, right? One thing I'm learning, because it took me a while to become aware in reality in my waking days, but now what I'm trying to do is also become aware at night when I'm sleeping, right? Because the more aware we are, the more of ourselves we can see. When you're in dreamland, you are within your own psyche, right? You are within your own astral world. And so you're experiencing yourself there just as you are here, right? And so in both cases, it is very important to be completely aware, right? You want to be completely aware of yourself and the things around you, right? Why though? What does this actually do for us? Because this awareness allows us to see ordeals as they come. So every time we face an ordeal, every time we face a challenge, we get to see it. We get to actually observe it. We know when it's coming. And then that makes it easier to take action against it. Makes it easier to do something to change it, right? But if we aren't aware, if we didn't see it coming, right? Think of driving again. Let's say we started driving with our eyes closed, and all of a sudden a car comes out of nowhere and hits us. We couldn't do anything about it because we had no awareness. We couldn't see the car, right? Or let's even use a different example. Let's say we have our eyes open and we get blindsided, right? We couldn't do anything about it because we couldn't see the car, right? But if we were more aware, if we made sure that we could see everything, every thought, every emotion, every action that we take, right? Everything that comes at us outside, right? Everything that comes to us, right? And obviously, like, outside things come from us, but we have to see it before it comes, right? So that we're ready for it, so that we can take on the challenge, because these things are happening because they are us. They are manifestations of us. And we are here to change, to transform, to overcome ourselves, right? To change these egos, to not let them consume us, to not let them consume our consciousness, right? So to pull the consciousness back is to increase our awareness, right? Increase our ability to observe. And so that's the real goal of the last video that I was talking about, is pulling your consciousness back so that you have more of it to use, so that you can see more, you can be aware of more, right? The more consciousness you have, the more internal awareness you can gain, right? The more internal awareness you can start to cultivate, which is a very powerful thing to have. Not only that, but you also have more external awareness. You have more awareness of the world around you as well. So, 2 reasons why observation is extremely important is because A, it's the only thing that you really have to do, and B, it is the thing that you need to do in order to guide your vessel in the right direction, right? Your vessel does the work, but you need to show it where to go. You need to observe the work that needs to be done on such a deep and profound level that your vessel moves forward, moves into it, moves through it even, right? Penetrates through it. You can increase your level of awareness to bring yourself to do the work, which is bare minimum, but with enough consciousness, with enough awareness, you can penetrate through the actual wall of resistance. You can penetrate through the work and actually come out the other side and create the result on the other side, right? But it's all about your level of consciousness, how much you have, and how well you can hold it on the thing. Right, the more concentrated and focused your consciousness becomes, the more results you can actually create. So, next piece is observing yourself. So as you as you gain more internal awareness, as you observe the mind a little bit more, what will happen is now you can start to observe yourself throughout the day more, right? So I say meditation is not a 10-minute practice. It is not an hour-long habit, right? It is a constant. It is a consistent thing that we do every moment of every day. All of us, well, most of us, are unconscious. So this is why we don't meditate all day. This is why we only take 10 minutes to meditate. But those who are conscious, truly conscious, are in a state of meditation all day long. And every time they get pulled out of that state, they pull themselves back. But for most, they meditate, they get all spiritually awakened and shit, and they feel great. Oh yeah, I meditated today. I'm more focused on this, that, and the third. And then they go right back to being unconscious. They go right back into their normal routine. They go right back into the mind, right? They return back to the state of unconsciousness the moment they achieved a little bit of consciousness, right? And so this is the thing we're trying to avoid. We want to start to observe ourselves and be aware of ourselves throughout the day, all day, every day, right? We never want to go unconscious. We never want to be unaware. And then eventually what will happen, like I said, what we want to do is be aware all the time, even in our dreams. To that extent, we want to also be aware in our dreams, right? We want to be aware of ourselves in every moment of every day, right? And obviously, like, this isn't just going to magically happen either, right? You can't just start and then all of a sudden you're aware of yourself and you can see yourself all the time, right? This takes a long time. It takes practice. This is a process. The point of meditation is to assist you, is to boost this practice, is to boost this process. But the end goal of meditation is to be able to maintain a meditative state even when we're not actually meditating. And so the last piece is going to be observing and transforming the ego, And so all of us have egos. All of us have multiple egos. We have many egos, right? We don't have just one. We have many, many, many egos. And all of these egos are essentially equal to the enemy, right? In all religious texts, in all philosophical traditions, all of them talk about an enemy. This enemy is not the devil, right? This enemy is ego. This enemy is simply the ego that we have now created for ourselves, right? We essentially are the enemies, but these egos aren't us, right? They are creations of us, but they're not us. So what we need to do is we need to kill them, all of them, every single one of them. We have to start by killing our desires for things. We have to start by killing our desire to have more, right? To have more than we already have, right? We need to kill desire, kill lust, right? And lust is not just sexual. Lust is desire for more than you have, right? Desire, constant desire, uncontrollable desire for more. We have to kill lust in order to kill these egos, because these egos are materialistic versions of us. These egos are the ones that want more pleasure. They seek more. They crave more, right? They don't have enough, right? And so we need to kill lust, kill these desires first, and that stops feeding at the egos, and then we can start to kill ego. So we have to identify where our lust is, right? We have to find what our lust is. For some, it will be sexual. And don't worry, I have courses for that, because sexuality is its own beast, right? But it could be sexual. It could be gluttony. It could be food, right? You want to eat. Or gluttony is consumption, period. It's not just food. So it could be food. It could be social media. It could be video games, right? It could be women. It could be money. It could be this, that, and the third, right? These wants, these desires that we have are what feeds the ego. And then from that, we create these egos, these identifications, and that ego is trapping our consciousness, right? So ego is basically just trapped consciousness, mental frameworks and mental structures that traps consciousness. So we need to kill, dissolve, and break down these egos to free our consciousness. And then by freeing our consciousness, we can observe ourselves more deeply. Does that make sense? And so I keep mentioning recreating a new ego. This isn't something you have to consciously do. This isn't something you have to actively do. You will create a new mental structure, a new framework as your soul becomes more integrated. So the real goal, the only real goal, is to kill off ego, pull back consciousness, right? Take our consciousness back for ourselves and use that consciousness to integrate more of the soul, right? Integrate more of the true being. I can make courses on that topic alone if you would like. Just DM me about that. And then, so observing and transforming the ego. And so we basically observe it, dissolve it, kill the ego, take the consciousness back, and we transform it by becoming a higher version of ourselves, right? And that higher version is going to be closer to our true being, and it is the result of integrating the soul. But that's all for this video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace. All right, welcome. So this is video 3 of module 2. So the state of self-awareness. So in the last video, I talked about observation and the importance of observation. Now I'm going to talk about the actual state of self-awareness, right? And two things, both how to achieve it and then how to maintain it and what to do with it, right? So the state of self-awareness. The first step is actually escaping, right? So escaping the routine and programmed self. So what is this? What is the routine self? What is the programmed self? If you observe, if you would look and see what you do on a day-to-day, you will find that you do a lot of the same things at the same time, around the same people, because of the same triggers. Basically, you have a consistent routine, right? You have a programming in your brain. And that programming is what you typically follow day to day, right? You follow this programming and you take the actions that it tells you to because you don't know what else to do. And the programming is ingrained so deeply that you almost identify with it. that you think it's who you are, that you think it's something you can't escape or something you can't become better than, right? It's something that is beyond you, right? It's something that is just who you are, just how God made you, right? But in reality, it's because you've taken these actions so consistently that they have become your habits. They have become your programmed self, right? Your strongest ego, your most prominent ego, right? And so you can observe and you can see that every day you have these actions, some of them good, some of them bad, right? But you don't have much control over these actions. You don't have much control over whether or not you actually take these actions. And so what a lot of people won't admit is that they've had this knowing, or they've just seen, right? They've had this thing that they do on a regular basis, but they have no control over it. All right. A lot of people won't admit the fact that there's something or many things that they just can't control whether or not they do. They do it. They justify it by saying this, that, and the third. This is who I am. It's really good, and it helps with this, that, and the third, and I need it for this, that, and the third, right? All of which are statements of identification, and they are copes for the fact that they know deep down that they can't actually control it. They can't actually change it. But this is false, because they can change it. They do have the power to overcome it. They do have the power to change it. And what is this power? What is this ability that they have that allows them to change it? You're going to be pissed because I just talked about it. It's observation. If you just watched the last video, you know exactly what I'm going to talk about. And that's why you're probably pissed, because you saw it coming. But the key is observation. We have to observe. We have to see it. We have to be like, what is this? Why is this? Who did this? Who put this in my mind? Who put this thought in my mind? Who told me that college was the only option to make money, right? Who told me that coffee was a good thing to drink regularly, right? Who told me that it was healthy? Who told me that it was necessary, right? Who told me that it gave you more energy, right? Who lied to you? Look at all of these things and look at where they actually came from, right? Observe where they actually came from. And by seeing where they actually came from, in a lot of cases, you will think, wow, I do not want this thing anymore. And in other cases, you might be like, wow, I wish I didn't do this thing, but now I want it, right? I'm so used to it, I really want it. So the first case is going to be someone who's slightly more aware. The second case is someone who's still asleep, who's someone who is still identified with these egos, right? We need to break identification first in order to actually dissolve the egos, right? So just observe your day-to-day routine. Observe the habits that you stick to. Observe the thoughts that you have, right? A lot of us actually have habitual thoughts, right? We have consistent thoughts about the same or similar things, right? And there are, in a lot of cases, someone will have the exact same thought at the exact same time every single day. And as crazy as that sounds, it's actually a real thing, right? And it's because they're so deeply ingrained, right? It becomes habitual because it's deeply ingrained into who you are. So the next step is going to be observing your action and reactions, right? So every action that you take, right? Every actual conscious action that you take throughout the day to break that cycle, to break that programming, right? Or it might be into the programming. You might be taking actions towards more of a deep level of being programmed, right? So you are taking action into the programming. In your reactions to things, right? Observe how you react to, let's say, anger or sadness or frustration or fear, right? How do you react to fear? How do you react to not knowing, right? And so just observe and see these reactions, see these actions that you take, right? Because this will help to essentially figure out where you are, first of all, whether you are completely unconscious or you do have a level of consciousness, right? But also, it'll help you to see how extreme or how powerful or how strong these egos are, these certain egos. Because most of these reactions are ego based, right? Unless there's actual conscious a gap between stimulus and response, right? Where we take the gap to really observe and figure out what the right direction is before acting, right? If we take that gap, there is a level of consciousness. But what we need to do is observe the times when we don't take that gap, the times when we react directly to the stimulus, right? This is a level of unconsciousness because there's no gap in between. We need a gap in between of consciousness, of awareness, of observation, right? And so observe when there's no gap, because when there's no gap, that is ego reacting, right? That is your programmed self reacting, right? And so the next step, when we're ready to go a little bit deeper, is to observe the inner worlds, right? It's to start to observe the internal worlds, right? The internal reality of who you are, right? And this is a very long process, right? So I began starting to observe the inner worlds, let's think, probably, I want to say a year ago, because that was when I started practicing alchemy. And when I started practicing alchemy, I didn't start to consciously decide to observe, but it awoken a certain energy within me that was too prominent for me not to see it. And by observing that energy, I have started to gain a level of awareness into the internal worlds. So I really started to explore the internal worlds probably about 6 months ago, 5 months ago-ish. And I've basically been doing it ever since, and I still feel like I've made no progress, right? Because the moment I started to really observe the internal worlds was the moment when everything started to come out. Everything started to go wrong for me, right? And seemingly go wrong. I say go wrong because that's like the physical understanding of it, but all of these things were going wrong because I was bringing out all of these parts of myself that were repressed before, that were suppressed. And so all of these negative versions of me have started to come out. And so it felt like I was failing. It felt like I was fucking up. It felt like I was kind of falling off of self-improvement, of my business, of everything, right? I felt like I was falling off. But really, it was because I was actually observing all of these things within me. I was actually bringing them out. What was happening is I was basically bubbling them up, boiling them up to the surface so that they could be released, so that they could be destroyed and broken down and recreated, reformed, transmuted is the better word. But yeah, so it takes time. I'm still in the process of mastering this part, but I have brought out a lot of these parts of myself, and I have killed off a lot of these parts of myself through doing this. So what I'm talking about doing is basically meditation, with the intention of bringing your consciousness inward and directing your consciousness inward in order to become more aware of yourself, in order to become more aware of your egos, who you are, your thoughts, your emotions, your energy, all of it, right? To become more aware of these things and to bring out all of the parts of it, right? So everything in your life that is going wrong started within. So bringing out all of these things, all of the things that are actually creating all of your suffering, bringing them out, seeing them, and facing them. And this is painful. This is hard. This was the period of time where I fell off self-improvement. I'm still recovering. Like, I'm still not on self-improvement anymore. I've basically just been trying to get through, trying to make these videos for you guys, and trying to basically push through, overcome myself, right? But it's hard. The very least I've been doing is going to the gym and making this content, and that's about it. That's all I've been able to do. And observing myself and actually facing myself, right? And doing this inner work. But it is hard because it brings out all of who you are, all of the different aspects of yourself. And this is probably going to hit you in a way that is not only hard to understand, but will make it seem like everything is going wrong, right? Because it's bringing out all of the parts of yourselves that is creating all of your negative situations. Does that make sense? So all of my stagnancy and my lack of progress was because of this part of myself that was lazy. And so I needed to face it. I needed to fight it. Not even fight it, but like face it and overcome it. in order to get to the next step, in order to get to the next level, in order to get to the new thing, right? So like now I'm in a stage, I am currently at the next step. So I'm going to explain what that is, but I'm currently at the stage where I need to recreate, I need to build back up, right? I've broken down, and then it's time to build back up. And so this is what I'm about to talk to you about, is actually restructuring the self. So now that I've faced the part of myself that was halting my progress, that was creating these limiting beliefs, or they were the limiting beliefs as well. Like you have to face the limiting beliefs. You also have to create the egos that are making and creating those limiting beliefs, right? So once you've faced those, broken the limiting beliefs, found the parts of yourselves that are keeping you stuck, right? So for me, it was a part of me that was lazy, right? It was a piece of laziness. It was laziness. It was fear. It was self-doubt, right? It was all of these things. So now that I brought them up to the surface and actually overcome them, right? Now that I've overcome them, now I have the opportunity to recreate myself, to create a new self. So now my next step is to get back on self-improvement, for example, right? It's to actually do the work again, right? It's to actually fully embrace the reality or the life that I'm moving into now, right? And so one way to do this is to write down exactly who you want to be. Write it down and read it every single day, right? Read exactly who you want to be. Or what I would do is I would rewrite it every single day. I would write it out every single day and read it every time you write it. What this will do is it will make it so very clear about who you want to be that it's almost impossible not to become them. You have to actually consciously go against that self. You have to actually consciously decide not to do it in order to do it. If you naturally go with the flow when you are programming yourself this way, you will naturally become that self, right? And so writing it down is a good option. There were times where I used to make videos and I would just talk to myself about the version of me that I was trying to become. That helped for me personally because I like to talk. I like to be vocal. Some people like writing though. So whatever works for you, just make it so that it's so clear, so obvious who you want to become that it's almost impossible not to do it. Right? So for me, I'm probably going to do this now after these videos. So I'm going to go home and I'm going to just write out exactly who I plan to become, exactly what I want to do. Because like for me, it's almost painful not to be doing full-time self-improvement, right? Like I grew up doing vigorous self-improvement. I would basically wake up in the morning, do self-improvement habits. I would get home from school, do self-improvement habits. I would bring books and journals to school so I could read and journal at school. Like I was always just on that shit, and I wasn't even like there, right? I wasn't even really doing it. But self-improvement was such a deep and big part of me and who I was that I just needed it. I needed to be doing it. I wanted to be doing it. It was everything to me. It was always everything to me. And then so now, not being on self-improvement for a few months, it's like, it hurts. It's painful. It like makes me question who the fuck I am. And that's where restructuring the self is. So now that I've faced the parts of myself that were limiting me, the parts of myself that weren't letting me get to that next level, now I can restructure. Now I can recreate, right? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to write, I'm going to journal exactly who it is I want to be, and then recreate that self, restructure that self, reform that self. And so enough about me, I'm here to help you guys, right? So you guys got to do the same thing. Once you've gotten to this stage, it'll take you a while to get to this stage. But even during the process, it'll be good to take this step, basically writing it down. But writing it down is the basic step, right? So writing it down is giving the direction. Writing it down is basically having Google Maps in the car, and you are keeping your awareness on Google Maps and keeping your awareness on that direction, on knowing where to go and what turns to take, right? But then what needs to happen is you actually got to drive to the place, right? You actually have to take the steps. And so the real part of recreating and restructuring the new self is actually just completely and utterly dropping the old self, right? So for the period of time when you're in observation, I say don't try to forcibly change anything. Don't try to actively change anything. Change what you can, but don't try to actively change anything. Why? Because you don't need to. because observation itself is what will transform you. Observation itself is what will bring these parts of you out so that you can face them. But then once you've gotten to the restructuring stage, it'll be good and effective for you to basically write it out, see it completely, see it clearly, and then completely cut out all habits and all identifications, all thoughts. And you can't stop thoughts, but you can stop becoming aware of thoughts. You can stop observing thoughts, right? You can start to let go of the thoughts that don't align. And the more you let them go, the less they will start to come. And what will come are thoughts that are relevant. So the more you control what thoughts you actually give attention to, the more you will start to have less and less and less thoughts. And then when you do want to use your brain as a tool, which is the only thing it's meant to be used as, you can consciously tap into the brain and you can use it. Otherwise, the brain is going to be able to do its job, which it can't when you're in there, when you are conscious and when you are aware within the brain, right? Awareness of the brain is one thing, but when you're actually consciously trapped in the mind, this creates problems, right? This is what the mental chaos is caused by, right? So once you are out of the mind and you have overcome this and you have this consciousness, right? And you are able to actually direct it onto something, direct it into who you want to be, right? Then you have the ability to basically ignore thoughts. You can just let them go. They will dissolve, they will break down, they won't be there, and you can stay out of the mind, and the mind will process the information, right? The mind will process the thoughts based on what you're paying the most attention to. Your mind will process and get rid of irrelevant thoughts and create new helpful thoughts and new helpful mental structures and neural pathways, right? So it's all about awareness of the thing, but at this specific point, what you need to do is you need to write out the new self, like I said, make it so clear that it's undeniable, and then completely and utterly cut out the old self. Completely and utterly cut out everything that is holding you back, right? So like it may be habits, like I said, thoughts, emotions, right? Being in certain emotional states. I don't know if it's the same for women or not, but from what I've heard, it's different. But for men, like we have the ability to just turn off emotions. Like we can just not ignore emotions, but we can just turn them off. Like you can just change your state if you'd like. But people who are essentially weak is the best way to put it. I don't mean to offend anybody, but like weak is the best way to put it. If you are weak, you won't want to change the emotional state because you'll want to gratify it somehow. But there's no point in this. It doesn't get you anywhere except creating more of that emotional state. So there's no point in reinforcing that. So I would just suggest changing it. Like that's the only other real option. Transmute the emotion and do something with it. Like that's really it. So controlling our emotional state, getting rid of any emotions that don't align, right? Getting rid of any habits that don't align, any thoughts that don't align, and just completely and utterly becoming this new self, right? And it takes time to integrate the new self fully, but what you've done by doing the work of observation, or what you will do by doing the work of observation and self-observation, is you will basically put yourself in a state where you are completely moldable, where you can completely and utterly change yourself and become whoever you want to be. And at this stage, it will be more painful for you to continue the bad habits. Does this make sense? So it will be hard at first, but you are in a primed state to be able to do it. So just go for it, right? So yeah, that's the process. The process is basically write it out, see it, and then just do it. Just actively do it, right? It won't be perfect, but if you just actively, continuously do it, continuously move forward into this new self, into this new reality, eventually you will be there, right? Eventually you will actually wake up one morning, write about this ideal self, and realize like, shit, there's nothing different between what's on my paper and who I am right now. And that's the goal. But yeah. All right, so that's the video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys in video 4 for this module. Peace. All right, welcome to video 4. So This one is going to be an easy one for me. Mindfulness practices. So basically, all of the actual actionable steps to apply what I've been talking about in the last 3 videos. So basically, quick recap of the last 3 videos. I talked about why it's a problem to be trapped in the mind. I talked about mental structures within that video, and I talked about ego within that video. I talked about observation, the importance of observation, observing the mind, observing yourself, and then observing the ego in order to transform it. Then I talked about the state of self-awareness, right? Creating a state of true self-awareness of who you currently are, of the programmed self, of the false self, and then who the ideal self would be, and then actually getting to a point where you are ready and able to restructure yourself fully and create a new self. Now I'm going to talk about all of the practices, the mindfulness practices that can be used in order to basically actually do this, right? So basically just what to do in order to apply what I've been talking about. So the first step, and everyone's going to hate me, meditation. It's got to be meditation, right? Meditation is basic. It's essential. It is necessary. You need to be meditating. If you are not meditating every day, that's all I can say, right? You got to be meditating, right? It's foundational. You need to be meditating. And don't tell me, oh, meditation is just for focus. Bullshit. Meditation is for focus. Yes, it helps with focus, but it is not just for focus. If the only benefit you got from meditation is focus, you are either completely unconscious, which is unlikely, or you haven't been meditating long enough. So what are the real implications of meditation? Is an increase in consciousness. You have a higher level and more, like a higher quantitative amount of consciousness. So you have more consciousness and you have a higher level of consciousness. And what this allows you to do is actually to fully observe yourself, fully observe the ego, fully observe who you are. And this is what we need in order to actually transform within and without. So meditation is essential, right? Creating this awareness, creating this self-awareness, bringing us into the present moment, right? The next thing is breath work. So for people who can't meditate because they can't focus on it or whatever, they get distracted. I say that's a limiting belief, but if you are really struggling with it, I will suggest you could do. Okay, a little bit of background noise, my bad. So I would suggest that you do breath work. So you can do breath work. You could either do Wim Hof, you could do pranayama, which I actually posted a guide in the community on pranayama. You could do Wim Hof, pranayama, or just deep breathing. You could just do regular deep breathing exercises. And it works just the same. And so you just take 5 minutes, really focus on your breath and yeah. But what this will do, the actual benefit of this is that you will be able to cultivate more nervous system control. So you'll basically learn to control the nervous energy, the flow of nervous energy, and therefore the entire nervous system, which gives you control of the entire vessel, the entire human being. And this is very, very powerful. But also it allows us to actually cultivate more internal awareness, a higher level of internal energy, and like I said, it gives us more control of the vessel, the human vessel. And so when we direct it, when we guide it in a certain direction, it follows more, it follows without as much resistance, right? So the more we do breath work, the less resistance our body and brain will have to listening to us and to actually obeying the orders. Meditation does a similar thing, the same thing, but not to the same extent, because breath work is specific to the air, the oxygen, the prana, and the nervous force, which is the air that we breathe, is the nervous force that runs through our nervous system and powers our entire human system, right? So by controlling specifically the breath, we control the flow of prana through the body, and therefore we control the nervous system, right? And meditation helps because of the state of basically resetting the body every time we get the desire to get up, right? But meditation is basically refocusing anytime we get distracted. Breath work is specific to gaining control over the nervous system. The next thing is present awareness. So awareness in the moment at all times. Present moment awareness. So we need to actually be aware within the present moment at all times. what is happening right now, you want to be as aware as possible. You want to be fully and utterly aware of what's going on for you right now, right in this moment. And what is going on around you. And what is going on within you, your mind, your body, right? What are the signals that you're actually feeling? The next thing I have is flow state. So when we get into flow state with either work or sports or let's say it's business, let's say it's reading, let's say it's drawing, whatever it is, when we get into flow state, we cultivate more awareness because we completely and utterly turn off of thoughts, and we completely involve ourselves, and we basically become a part of the task at hand, is the best way to put it. We become an actual part of the task at hand. And so what this does is it completely removes thoughts, it completely removes ego, and even though it's only maintained for a certain amount of time, being in this state will actually boost you in this entire process, right? Because being in this state, because this state is the end goal. The end goal is a flow state at all times, right? And I doubt many of us will ever get there, but the goal is flow state at all times, right? And so by being in this state, even for a couple hours a day, right, it teaches us how to actually adopt this full state of focus, right? This full state of awareness. And so by maintaining it even just for a couple hours a day, it's just like practice with any other skill. It will still make us significant progress, right? Even if the end goal is for it to be all day, a couple hours a day will make us significant progress in the skill. And then, obviously, a consistent meditation routine will actually make it easy to get into flow states. So, like, for example, I haven't been meditating recently, but the last time I remember when I was consistently meditating, I could basically get into like 4 to 5 flow states a day, and all for like an hour to 2 hours. So that's a major advantage. And if you want to utilize it to its fullest, meditate, and then just get into flow state as much as possible. And the last thing is journaling, because journaling will give us awareness of our mind and our thoughts, right? So we want to journal all of our thoughts, all of what's going on in the mind all the time, so that we can constantly see what we're thinking, how we're feeling, who we are, who we're becoming, right? Whether there are things that we need to change, or there are things that have been changing and we are very happy about it, or there are things that haven't changed and we're also happy about that, right? So whatever it is, you just need to become aware of the state of your mind is basically the goal here, is becoming aware of your thoughts, aware of your emotional states, right? Because a lot of our thoughts can be emotionally triggered. So yeah, journaling in order to become more aware. So these are all mindfulness practices, right? To become more mindful, to become more aware of ourselves and of our reality itself, right? So that was the end of module 2. I will see you guys in the third module. Peace.